David had been working at Summit Tech for 7 years. He was good at his job, maybe too good. Everyone knew him as the guy who never mixed business with pleasure. His office was always neat. His reports were always on time, and he never got involved in office drama. That was his rule: keep work and personal life separate. But rules have a way of breaking when you least expect them. It was a Tuesday morning when everything changed. David was sitting in the big conference room, half listening to another boring presentation about quarterly numbers. The coffee was cold. The air conditioning was too loud. And he was thinking about lunch when the door opened. She walked in like she owned the place. Confident steps, bright smile, and a presence that made everyone sit up straighter. This was Isabella Chen, the new head of legal affairs. David had heard about her. Harvard graduate, 10 years of experience, and a reputation for being brilliant. But tough. Sorry I'm late, she said, not sounding sorry at all. Traffic was crazy. David watched as she set up her laptop and pulled out a stack of papers. She was different from the other executives. While they all wore the same gray suits and serious expressions, Isabella had this energy that filled the room. When she caught him looking, she didn't look away. Instead, she smiled. The meeting went on for another hour. Isabella presented the legal side of a big merger deal the company was working on. She explained complicated laws in simple terms, made jokes that actually made people laugh, and somehow made contract negotiations sound interesting. David found himself paying attention for the first time in months when she finished her presentation. The room was quiet for a moment. Then everyone started talking at once, asking questions, making suggestions. Isabella handled it all with ease, like she'd been doing this forever. Any other questions? She asked, looking round the room. David's boss, Mr. Thompson, raised his hand. What about the timeline? Can we really close this deal by the end of the month? Isabella smiled. If everyone does their part, absolutely. But it's going to require some late nights and weekend work. The meeting ended, and everyone started packing up their things. David was putting his laptop in his bag when he felt someone sit down next to him. He looked up to see Isabella, still smiling. You're David Rodriguez, right? Marketing department? That's right, he said, surprised she knew his name. I've heard good things about you. Thompson says you're his best project manager. David felt his face get warm. He's being kind. I doubt that, Isabella said. She pulled out a coffee cup and took a sip. This coffee is terrible, by the way. How do you people drink this stuff? David laughed. We don't really have a choice. It's the only coffee machine on this floor. Isabella made a face. There's a great cafe 2 blocks away. Much better than this. She looked at him for a moment, then pushed her cup toward him. Want to taste human? Maybe you'll see what real coffee should taste like. The way she said it, playful, teasing, made David's heart skip. He looked at the cup, then at her. She was watching him with those bright eyes, waiting to see what he would do. I shouldn't, he said, but his hand was already reaching for the cup. Why not? It's just coffee. But they both knew it wasn't just coffee. There was something in the air between them, something that made this simple gesture feel bigger than it was. David took a sip. The coffee was amazing, rich, smooth, nothing like the office coffee. Good? Isabella asked. Really good, David said, handing the cup back. Their fingers touched for just a second, and David felt electricity run up his arm. I told you, Isabella said, standing up. Maybe next time you'll trust me from the start. She walked away, leaving David sitting there with his heart racing. He watched her go, noticing how she moved with such confidence, how other people stepped aside to let her pass. She was magnetic, and David was already feeling the pull. Over the next few days, David couldn't stop thinking about that moment. Every time he drank the terrible office coffee, he thought about Isabella's cup and her playful challenge. He found himself looking for her in the hallways, hoping to run into her by the elevators or in the break room. On Thursday, he got his chance. Isabella was standing by the copy machine, looking frustrated. Everything okay? David asked. This machine hates me, she said, pressing buttons randomly. I just need to copy these contracts. Let me help, David said, moving closer. He could smell her perfume, something light and fresh. This machine is tricky. You have to press this button first, then this one. The machine started working, and Isabella smiled. You're a lifesaver. How did you know that? I've been fighting with this machine for 7 years, David said. We understand each other now. Isabella laughed. 7 years? Wow, you must really like it here. It's a good company, David said. Good people, interesting work. What about you? Do you like your work? David thought about it. Most days, marketing can be creative, but sometimes it feels like we're just pushing papers around. I know what you mean, Isabella said, collecting her copies. Law isn't always as exciting as people think. Lots of reading, lots of paperwork. But you seem to enjoy it, David said. I do. I like solving problems, finding solutions that work for everyone. She looked at him. What about you? What do you do when you're not pushing papers around? David felt that same electricity from before. I like hiking, photography. Nothing too exciting. Photography sounds interesting. What do you photograph? Mostly landscapes. Some street photography. I'm not very good at it. I bet you're better than you think. Isabella said, maybe you can show me some of your work sometime. Before David could respond, Isabella's phone buzzed. She looked at it and frowned. I have to go. Conference call with the New York office. She started to walk away, then turned back. That coffee place I mentioned, it's called Morning Brew, in case you ever want to try some real coffee. She walked away, leaving David standing by the copy machine, wondering what had just happened. He had been flirting with his coworker, and she had been flirting back. This was dangerous territory, and he knew it. Summit Tech had strict rules about relationships between employees, especially between department heads. David had seen what happened to people who broke those rules. They usually ended up looking for new jobs, but as he walked back to his office, David couldn't shake the feeling that some risks might be worth taking. Isabella was different from anyone he'd ever met. She was smart, funny, confident, and she seemed genuinely interested in him. When was the last time someone had asked about his photography? That evening, David found himself walking past Morning Brew on his way home. Through the window, he could see people sitting at small tables, drinking coffee and chatting. It looked warm and inviting, nothing like the sterile office environment he was used to. He thought about Isabella's invitation, about the way she had smiled when she mentioned the cafe. Was she asking him out, or was she just being friendly? David stood outside the cafe for a few minutes, watching people come and go. Finally, he walked away without going in. It was too risky, too complicated. He had worked too hard to get where he was to throw it all away for a woman he barely knew. But as he walked home, David couldn't stop thinking about Isabella's words, want to taste. Human? The way she had said it, like she was offering him something much more than coffee, like she was offering him a chance to step outside his careful, controlled life and try something new. David Rodriguez had always played it safe, but for the first time in years, he was starting to wonder what would happen if he didn't. The next 2 weeks changed everything for David. What started as casual conversations by the copy machine turned into something much more complicated. Isabella seemed to be everywhere in meetings, in the elevator, in the break room, and every time she saw him, she had that same playful smile. It started small. Isabella would save him a seat in meetings, even when there were plenty of empty chairs. She'd ask his opinion on projects that had nothing to do with marketing. When she passed his office, she'd wave through the glass door, and David would find himself smiling for no reason. The merger project brought them together more often. David's marketing team needed to understand the legal requirements, and Isabella's legal team needed to know how they planned to present the deal to the public. This meant long meetings, shared documents, and lots of late nights at the office. This is getting complicated, David said one evening. They were alone in the conference room, surrounded by papers and empty coffee cups. It was past 8, and most people had gone home. Which part? Isabella asked, not looking up from her laptop. The merger or something else? David felt his face get warm. The merger, of course. Isabella smiled. Of course. She closed her laptop and stretched. I'm starving. Want to grab dinner? I should probably head home, David said, but he wasn't moving toward the door. Come on, David. We've been working for 12 hours straight. We need food. Isabella stood up and started packing her things. I know a place nearby. Great food. And they're open late. David knew he should say no. Having dinner with a coworker was one thing, but having dinner with Isabella felt different. It felt like crossing a line. Just dinner, Isabella said, reading his expression. We can talk about the project, okay? David said before he could stop himself. Just dinner. The restaurant was small and cozy, with dim lighting and soft music. Isabella ordered for both of them, speaking to the waiter in perfect Spanish. David watched her, impressed by how comfortable she seemed everywhere she went. So, Isabella said after the waiter left, tell me about your photography. It's just a hobby. David said, nothing special. Everything's special to somebody. Isabella said, what do you like to photograph? David found himself talking about his weekend trips to the mountains, about catching the sunrise over the city, about the way light changed everything. Isabella listened, asking questions, making him feel like his hobby actually mattered. I'd love to see some of your work, she said. Maybe someday, David said, then changed the subject. What about you? What do you do when you're not being a legal genius? Isabella laughed. Legal genius? I like that. She took a sip of her wine. I read a lot. I travel when I can. I try new restaurants. She looked at him. I flirt with cute marketing managers. David nearly choked on his water. Isabella, what? I'm just being honest. She leaned forward. You're smart, you're funny, and you have this serious thing going on that I find really attractive. We work together, David said quietly. I know. Isabella's voice was just as quiet. That's what makes it interesting. They sat in silence for a moment, the weight of her words hanging between them. David felt like he was standing at the edge of a cliff, and Isabella was asking him to jump. This is crazy, he said. The best things usually are, Isabella replied. They finished dinner, and Isabella insisted on paying company expense, she said with a wink. We did talk about the project for about 5 minutes, David said. That counts. Walking back to their cars, David felt the tension between them growing stronger. When they reached Isabella's car, she turned to face him. I had a good time tonight, she said. Me too. David admitted. Isabella stepped closer. Want to do it again sometime? David's heart was pounding. Isabella, I don't think, she said softly. Just answer. Do you want to see me again? Yes, David said, the word coming out before he could stop it. Isabella smiled. Good, because I want to see you too. She got in her car and drove away, leaving David standing in the parking lot, wondering what he had just agreed to. Back at the office the next day, everything felt different. David found himself watching Isabella in meetings, remembering their conversation from the night before. When she caught him looking, she gave him a small smile that made his stomach flip. During lunch, Isabella appeared at his office door. Busy? She asked. Not really, David said, gesturing to his empty desk. Want to take a walk? I need some fresh air. They walked around the building, talking about work, about the weather, about anything except what had happened the night before. But David was very aware of Isabella walking beside him, of the way she moved, of how close she was. David, Isabella said as they headed back inside, about last night. Yeah, I meant what I said. About wanting to see you again. David stopped walking. Isabella, this is complicated. I know. But complicated doesn't mean impossible. She touched his arm lightly. I'm not asking you to quit your job or run away with me. I'm just asking you to be open to possibilities. And if we get caught, Isabella shrugged, then we deal with it. But we're both adults. We can be careful. That afternoon, David couldn't concentrate on anything. He kept thinking about Isabella's words, about the way she had touched his arm. about the possibility of something more between them. At 5 o'clock, his phone buzzed. A text from Isabella. Coffee, the good kind, not the office stuff. David stared at the message for a long time. This was his chance to step back, to keep things professional. But as he looked at the text, he realized he didn't want to step back. For the first time in years, he felt truly alive. He typed back, "Morning brew. See you in 20." Came the reply. David grabbed his jacket and headed for the elevator, his heart racing. He was about to cross a line that could change everything. But as the elevator doors closed, he realized he was okay with that. Isabella was right. The best things usually were a little crazy. 20 minutes later, David walked into Morning Brew and saw Isabella sitting at a corner table, 2 cups of coffee already waiting. She looked up when she saw him and smiled. "I wasn't sure you'd come," she said. "Neither was I," David admitted, sitting down across from her. "But you're here. I'm here." Isabella pushed one of the cups toward him. "Want to taste? Human?" David laughed, remembering the first time she'd said those words. "You're never going to let me forget that, are you?" "Never," Isabella said, grinning. "It's when I knew you were interested. That obvious to me, yes?" Isabella's expression grew more serious. "David, I want you to know that I don't usually do this. I don't usually get involved with people I work with. What makes this different?" Isabella thought for a moment. "You do. There's something about you that makes me want to take the risk." David felt something shift inside him. Maybe it was the way Isabella was looking at him, or maybe it was the realization that he felt the same way. Either way, he made his decision. "Okay," he said. "Okay, let's see where this goes. But we have to be careful." Isabella's smile lit up her whole face. "We will be, I promise." As they sat there talking, David realized that his carefully controlled life was about to become much more complicated. But looking at Isabella, seeing the genuine happiness in her eyes, he decided that maybe complicated wasn't such a bad thing after all. Living a double life was harder than David had imagined. For 3 weeks now, he and Isabella had been meeting in secret, and the constant planning was exhausting. They couldn't be seen together outside of work meetings. They couldn't arrive at the office together or leave together. Even their text messages had to be carefully worded in case someone saw them. But despite the complications, David had never been happier. Isabella brought out a side of him he'd forgotten existed. She made him laugh, challenged his ideas, and made him feel like the most interesting person in the world. When they were together, all the stress and secrecy seemed worth it. Their first real date had been at a small restaurant across town, far from anyone who might recognize them. Isabella had worn a simple blue dress that made her eyes sparkle, and David had barely been able to focus on the conversation. They talked for hours about everything and nothing, their childhoods, their dreams, their fears. "I wanted to be a writer when I was a kid," Isabella had confessed over dessert. "I wrote terrible poetry and thought I was the next great American novelist." "What changed?" David asked. "Reality," Isabella said with a laugh. "My parents convinced me that law was more stable." They weren't wrong. "But sometimes I wonder what would have happened if I'd followed my heart instead of my head." "It's not too late," David said. "You could still write." "Maybe," Isabella said. But her smile was sad. "What about you? Did you always want to be in marketing?" David shook his head. "I wanted to be a photographer, travel the world, capture beautiful moments, tell stories through pictures." "What stopped you?" "Same thing that stopped you, fear." "It's easier to take the safe path." Isabella reached across the table and took his hand. "Maybe we both need to be braver." That conversation had stayed with David for days. Isabella was right. They both needed to be braver. But being brave in their personal lives was one thing. Being brave with their careers was something else entirely. The merger project gave them plenty of legitimate reasons to work together. David's marketing team needed constant updates from Isabella's legal team, and Isabella needed to understand the marketing strategy to make sure all their communications were legally sound. It was the perfect cover for their relationship, but it also meant spending long hours together in conference rooms, trying to act professional while fighting the urge to reach for each other. David found himself distracted during meetings, watching the way Isabella pushed her hair behind her ear when she was concentrating, or how she bit her lip when she was thinking. "Are you even listening?" Isabella asked one evening. They were alone in the conference room again. "Working on contract details, sorry," David said, focusing on the documents in front of him. "What were you saying?" "I was saying that we need to be more careful," Isabella said quietly. "People are starting to notice." David looked up. "What do you mean?" "Linda from HR asked me yesterday if we were working well together. She said she'd heard we were spending a lot of time in meetings." "We are working well together," David said. "And we do spend a lot of time in meetings. That's not suspicious." "Maybe not," Isabella said. But she looked worried. "I just don't want to take any chances." David understood her concern. They both had too much to lose if their relationship became public. Isabella had worked hard to establish herself in a male-dominated field, and David had spent years building his reputation. One scandal could destroy everything. "Maybe we should slow down," David said. Though the words felt wrong coming out of his mouth, Isabella looked at him for a long moment. "Is that what you want?" "No," David said honestly. "But maybe it's what we should do." Isabella closed her laptop and moved to the chair next to him. "David, I know this is complicated. I know we're taking risks, but I've never felt this way about anyone before." David felt his resolve crumbling. "Isabella, I'm not asking you to choose between me and your job," she said. "I'm just asking you to choose me along with everything else. We can make this work if we're smart about it." David looked into her eyes and saw the same feelings he'd been struggling with for weeks. The fear, the excitement, the hope that maybe they could have something real together. "Okay," he said, "but we need rules." "Rules?" "No more dinners at restaurants where we might be seen. No more texts during work hours unless it's about the project. We meet at different places each time." David paused. "And we don't tell anyone. Not your friends, not mine. Nobody." Isabella nodded. "I can live with that. And if this gets too complicated, if we start affecting our work or if people get suspicious, we stop. No questions asked. Deal," Isabella said, but she didn't look happy about it. Over the next few weeks, they developed a routine. They would meet at different coffee shops around the city, always at different times, always in different neighborhoods. Sometimes they would go to bookstores or art galleries, places where they could walk and talk without drawing attention. David discovered that Isabella was full of surprises. She knew about art, could discuss photography techniques with him for hours, and had strong opinions about everything from movies to politics. She challenged him in ways he'd never experienced before. "You're too careful," she told him one afternoon as they walked through a park. "You think too much about what could go wrong instead of what could go right. That's kept me out of trouble so far," David said. "Has it? Or has it kept you from really living?" David didn't have an answer for that. He'd always prided himself on being responsible, on making smart choices. But being with Isabella made him question whether playing it safe was really the best way to live. Their relationship deepened in ways that surprised them both. They talked about their families, their ambitions, their insecurities. Isabella told him about growing up as the daughter of immigrants, about the pressure she felt to succeed, about the loneliness of always being the only woman in the room. David shared his own struggles, the fear of taking risks, the way he built walls around himself after his last relationship ended badly, the dreams he'd given up because they seemed too uncertain. "I used to think I needed to have everything figured out," David told her one evening as they sat on a bench overlooking the city. "But being with you makes me think. Maybe it's okay not to know what comes next." "I like not knowing," Isabella said, leaning against his shoulder. "For the first time in my life, I'm not planning 5 steps ahead. I'm just enjoying right now." But even as they grew closer, the stress of keeping their relationship secret took its toll. David found himself constantly looking over his shoulder, worried that someone might see them together. He started second-guessing every interaction they had at work, wondering if he was being too friendly or too distant. Isabella seemed to handle the pressure better. But David could see the strain in her face sometimes. She was naturally outgoing and friendly, but at work she became more reserved, more careful about what she said and did. The hardest part was pretending not to care when other people at the office made comments about Isabella. David had to sit quietly when his coworker Jake made jokes about the Ice Queen in legal, or when someone complained about how demanding she was. He wanted to defend her, to tell them how wrong they were, but he couldn't without revealing too much. "It's okay," Isabella told him when he apologized for not speaking up. "I'm used to it. People always have opinions about women in positions of power." "It's not okay," David said. "They don't know you at all." "No, they don't," Isabella agreed. "But you do. That's what matters." As their relationship continued, David realized that he was falling in love with Isabella, not just attracted to her, not just infatuated, but genuinely in love. The thought terrified him. Love made everything more complicated, more dangerous. Love made the stakes higher. But looking at Isabella, seeing the way she smiled when she thought, he wasn't watching. David knew it was too late to protect his heart. He was already in too deep to turn back now. The only question was whether their love was strong enough to survive the challenges ahead. Because despite their careful planning and secret meetings, David had a feeling that their hidden relationship was about to become much more complicated than either of them had bargained for. The company retreat in Colorado was supposed to be a routine event, 3 days of team building, strategy sessions, and networking at a luxury resort in the mountains. David had been to these retreats before. They were usually boring but harmless. This time felt different because Isabella would be there too. They had agreed to keep their distance during the retreat. No secret meetings, no private conversations, no lingering looks. It would be 3 days of pure professionalism. But as David packed his bag, he couldn't shake the feeling that something was about to go wrong. The resort was beautiful, nestled in the mountains with stunning views and expensive everything. David checked into his room on the 3rd floor and tried not to think about where Isabella might be staying. They had a job to do, present the merger proposal to the board of directors. Everything else would have to wait. The first day went smoothly. David gave his marketing presentation in the morning, outlining the public relations strategy for the merger. Isabella presented the legal framework in the afternoon, explaining the regulatory requirements and timeline. They were professional, focused, and careful not to interact more than necessary. But on the second evening, everything changed. The official presentations were over, and most people had gone to the bar or back to their rooms. David was in the business center, working on some last-minute changes to his presentation slides. He was alone, or so he thought, when Isabella appeared in the doorway. "Still working?" she asked, looking around to make sure no one else was there. "Just finishing up," David said, not looking away from his laptop screen. "You should go. People might see us." "There's no one here," Isabella said, closing the door behind her. "Everyone's at the bar." David finally looked up. Isabella was wearing a simple black dress that made her look incredibly beautiful. Her hair was down, and she looked relaxed in a way he rarely saw at the office. "Isabella, we agreed. I know what we agreed," she said, walking over to his table. "But I've barely spoken to you in days. I miss talking to you." David felt his resolve weakening. "We can talk when we get back to the city, can we?" Isabella sat down across from him. "When? Between meetings? During our secret coffee dates where we have to pretend we're just colleagues." "That's what we agreed to," David said, but his voice lacked conviction. "I know," Isabella said softly, "but sometimes I wonder if we're being too careful. If maybe we're missing out on something good because we're so afraid of what might happen." David closed his laptop. "Isabella, what are you saying?" "I'm saying that I care about you more than I probably should, and I'm tired of hiding it." The room was quiet except for the sound of David's heartbeat in his ears. He looked at Isabella, seeing the vulnerability in her eyes, the way she was, waiting for him to respond. "I care about you too," he said quietly. "But that doesn't change anything. We still work together. The company still has rules." "Rules," Isabella repeated. Sometimes I think we use rules as an excuse to avoid taking risks. Before David could respond, they heard voices in the hallway. Someone was coming. Isabella quickly moved to the other side of the room, pretending to look at some papers on the printer. David opened his laptop and tried to look busy. But it was too late. The door opened, and Kevin Walsh walked in. Kevin was David's biggest rival in the marketing department, always looking for ways to make David look bad. He was also known for gossiping about everyone in the office. "Oh," Kevin said, looking from David to Isabella. "Sorry, didn't know anyone. Wasn't here. Just finishing up some work," David said, trying to sound casual. "And I was making some copies," Isabella added, holding up some papers. Kevin smiled, but it wasn't a friendly smile. "Working late again. I see. You'd have been putting in a lot of extra hours lately." "The merger is a big project," Isabella said coolly. "It requires a lot of coordination." "I'm sure it does," Kevin said. "Well, don't let me interrupt. I just need to print something." Kevin went to the printer, but David could feel him watching. Then Isabella finished gathering her papers and headed for the door. "Good night," she said to both of them, but her eyes met David's for just a moment longer than necessary. After Isabella left, Kevin looked at David with a knowing expression. "Interesting partnership you to have. It's a professional partnership," David said firmly. "Of course it is," Kevin said, but his tone suggested he didn't believe it. David packed up his things and went back to his room, but he couldn't sleep. He kept thinking about the way Kevin had looked at them, the suspicion in his voice. Had they been that obvious? Had other people noticed too? The next morning, David tried to act normal during the final presentations, but he noticed Kevin watching him and Isabella throughout the meeting. Every time they spoke to each other, Kevin was there, listening, observing. After the presentations ended, David overheard Kevin talking to Linda from HR by the coffee station. "I'm just saying," Kevin was saying, "they spend a lot of time together. And last night in the business center, there was definitely something going on, Kevin." Linda said, "You need to be careful about making accusations without proof." "I'm not making accusations," Kevin said. "I'm just making observations." David felt his stomach drop. If Kevin was talking to HR, it meant trouble. He needed to warn Isabella. He found her in the lobby, checking out of the hotel. She was talking to some colleagues, laughing at something someone had said. David waited until the others left, then approached her. "We need to talk," he said quietly. Isabella looked at him, noticed his worried expression. "What's wrong?" "Not here," David said. "Too many people." They walked outside to the parking area, where they could talk without being overheard. "Kevin saw us last night," David said, "in the business center. And this morning I heard him talking to Linda from HR. Isabella's face went pale. "What was he saying?" "He thinks there's something going on between us. He's suspicious." Isabella was quiet for a moment, processing this information. "What do we do?" "We need to be extra careful when we get back to the office. No more private meetings, no more working late together. We might need to take a break from seeing each other outside of work." "A break?" Isabella looked. Her and David. "We can't let Kevin dictate our relationship." "This isn't about Kevin," David said. "This is about protecting ourselves. If HR starts investigating, they'll find out about our relationship, and then we'll both be in trouble." Isabella stared at him for a long moment. "So we just give up. We let fear win." "We're being smart," David said. "We always knew this day might come." "I thought we were stronger than this," Isabella said quietly. "We are," David said. "But we also need to be realistic." Isabella nodded, but David could see the disappointment in her eyes. They drove back to the city separately, and David spent the entire trip wondering if they had just made a terrible mistake. Back at the office, David tried to act normal, but everything felt different. He and Isabella were polite but distant in meetings. They communicated through email instead of talking in person. The easy partnership they had developed was gone, replaced by awkward professionalism. But Kevin wasn't satisfied. Over the next few weeks, he continued to watch them, to ask casual questions about their work together, to make comments that suggested he knew more than he was saying. "How's the merger project going?" he asked David one afternoon. "Still working closely with Isabella. We're working together as needed," David said carefully. "She's quite something, isn't she?" Kevin said with a smile. "Smart, beautiful, successful. I can see why someone might be interested in her." David felt his temper rising, but kept his voice steady. "She's a good lawyer. I'm sure she is." Kevin said, "Very good at what she does." David knew Kevin was fishing for information, trying to get him to react, but he also knew that Kevin was building a case, gathering evidence. It was only a matter of time before Kevin made his move. 2 weeks later, David's fears were realized. He was called into a meeting with Mr. Thompson, the department head, and Linda from HR. The moment he walked into the room and saw their serious expressions, he knew his secret was out. "David," Mr. Thompson said, "we need to discuss your relationship with Isabella Chen." David felt his world crashing down around him after months of careful planning. Secret meetings and hidden feelings, everything was about to come out into the open. The question now was whether their love was strong enough to survive what was coming next. David sat in the conference room, facing Mr. Thompson and Linda from HR, feeling like his entire world was about to collapse. The silence stretched on for what felt like hours, but was probably only seconds. "David," Linda said gently, "we've received some concerns about your professional relationship with Isabella Chen. We need to discuss this openly and honestly." "What kind of concerns?" David asked. Though he already knew the answer, Thompson leaned forward. "We've been told that your relationship with Isabella may have gone beyond professional boundaries. Is this true?" David felt his mouth go dry. This was the moment he'd been dreading for months. He could lie, deny everything, and hope they didn't have proof, or he could tell the truth and face the consequences. "I need to know," Linda continued. "Are you and Isabella involved in a personal relationship?" David looked at his hands, then back at their faces. These were people he'd worked with for years, people he respected. He couldn't lie to them. "Yes," he said quietly, "we are." Mr. Thompson sighed deeply. "David, you know the company policy about relationships between department heads. This puts us in a very difficult position." "I know," David said. "We've been very careful to keep our personal relationships separate from work." "Have you?" Linda asked. "Because we've received reports that your professional judgment may have been affected. There are questions about some of the decisions made during the merger project." David felt panic rising in his chest. "What decisions?" "Everything we've done has been in the best interest of the company, perhaps," Mr. Thompson said. "But the appearance of impropriety is almost as damaging as actual impropriety. The board is concerned about how this looks." "Where's Isabella?" David asked. "Is she in a similar meeting?" "Isabella is being questioned separately," Linda said. "But David, we need to focus on your situation right now." The meeting continued. For another hour, they asked detailed questions about when the relationship started, how it had affected their work, whether other employees knew about it. David answered as honestly as he could, but he could see that his answers weren't helping his case. "We'll need to investigate this thoroughly," Linda said finally. "In the meantime, you'll be placed on administrative leave." "For how long?" David asked. "Until we can determine the full extent of the situation and decide on appropriate action." Mr. Thompson said, "I'm sorry, David. You're a good employee, but this is bigger than just you now." David cleaned out his desk under the watchful eye of security. Other employees stared as he packed his belongings into a box. Some looked sympathetic, others curious, and a few seemed pleased by his downfall. Kevin Wall stood by the coffee machine, watching with a satisfied smile. That evening, David's phone rang. It was Isabella. "Can we meet?" she asked. Her voice sounded strained. "Is that a good idea?" David asked. "We're probably being watched." "I don't care anymore," Isabella said. "I need to see you." They met at a small park across town, away from anyone who might know them. Isabella looked tired, stressed, and angry. "They want us to resign," she said without preamble. David felt his heart sink. Both of us?" "Both of us. They're saying that our relationship compromised the merger project. They're questioning every decision we made, every recommendation we gave. But the merger was successful, David said. We did good work. That doesn't matter now. Isabella said bitterly. They're more concerned about appearances than results. They sat on a bench, watching the sunset, both lost in their own thoughts. Do you regret it? David asked finally. Isabella looked at him. Regret what? Us? Yes, if you could go back and change things, would you? Isabella was quiet for a long moment. I regret that we got caught. I regret that our relationship hurt our careers. But I don't regret falling in love with you. David felt a weight lift from his chest. I love you too. I know, Isabella said with a small smile. You're terrible at hiding it. So what do we do now? David asked. We have two choices. Isabella said. We can fight this, hire lawyers, make it messy for everyone. Or we can resign with dignity and move on with our lives. What do you want to do? Isabella sighed. I want to fight. Every instinct I have tells me to fight. But I also know that fighting will just make things worse. It will drag out the process, damage our reputations even more, and probably end with the same result. So we resign. We resign, Isabella said. But we negotiate the terms. We make sure we get good severance packages, neutral references, and we leave on our own terms over the next week. Isabella proved once again why she was such a good lawyer. She negotiated their resignation skillfully, securing generous severance packages and agreements that the company would provide positive references for both of them. She also made sure that the company agreed not to discuss the circumstances of their departure with potential employers. How did you manage all that? David asked when she told him about the final agreement. I reminded them that we both have copies of all our work on the merger project, Isabella said, and I made it clear that if they tried to damage our reputations, we might have to defend ourselves publicly. You basically blackmailed them? I prefer to think of it as aggressive negotiation, Isabella said with a grin. Their last day at Summit Tech was surreal. They cleaned out their offices, said goodbye to colleagues, and tried to act like everything was normal. Some people seemed genuinely sorry to see them go. Others avoided eye contact. Kevin Walsh made a point of stopping by David's office as he was packing. Sorry to see you go, Kevin said, though his tone suggested otherwise. No, you're not, David said calmly. But that's okay. You got what you wanted. Kevin's smile faltered. I was just looking out for the company's interests. Of course you were, David said. I'm sure your promotion to head of marketing had nothing to do with it. Kevin's face went red. But he didn't deny it. He walked away without another word. 6 months later, David was working at a smaller marketing firm across town. The pay was less, but the work was more creative and interesting. He was finally doing the kind of projects he'd always wanted to. Isabella had joined a prestigious law firm as a senior partner. She was working on cases that challenged her, and she seemed happier than she'd been in years. They had moved in together 3 months after leaving Summit Tech. Living together had been an adjustment. They'd gone from secret meetings to sharing a bathroom, but it felt right. They were finally able to be open about their relationship, to hold hands in public, to make plans for the future. Any regrets? David asked one evening as they sat on their balcony, watching the city lights. About leaving Summit Tech, Isabella asked. None. That place was making me miserable, and I didn't even realize it until I left. About us, Isabella smiled. Definitely not about us. Though I do have one regret. What's that? I wish we'd been braver sooner. I wish we'd fought for our relationship instead of hiding it. David thought about that. Maybe we needed to hide it at first. Maybe we needed to figure out what we meant to each other before we could fight for it. Maybe. Isabella said, but next time, if there's a next time, I'm not hiding anything. Life's too short to spend it being afraid. Next time, David laughed. Are you planning to fall in love with another coworker? No, Isabella said, leaning against him. I'm planning to stay in love with this one. A year later, David proposed to Isabella in the same park where they decided to resign from Summit Tech. It seemed fitting, the place where one chapter of their lives had ended. would be where the next chapter began. Want to taste human? Isabella had asked that first day, offering him her coffee cup. Now, as David looked at the engagement ring on her finger, he realized he'd been tasting something much sweeter than coffee. He'd been tasting the possibility of a life lived bravely, authentically, and with someone who made him want to be a better person. Their love story had cost them their jobs, their carefully planned careers, and their reputations at their old company. But it had given them something more valuable, the courage to choose love over fear, authenticity over safety, and each other over everything else. As they walked home from the park, engaged and happy, David realized that some risks were worth taking, some rules were worth breaking, and some love stories were worth fighting for, even when the odds were against you. Isabella had been right from the beginning. The best things in life usually were a little crazy, and David was grateful every day that he'd been brave enough to taste what she was offering.